Well, it's 8 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to all the South Africans, evening to all the attendees who are attending this webinar. And we can see that the numbers are rising very, very fast. The Minister of Health, uh, the Honorable Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, the Deputy Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Joe Pahla, the Director General of Health, Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, esteemed panelists, senior officials from the Department of Health, colleagues in healthcare, members of the Media Fellow South Africans, welcome to this webinar. Tonight we will be talking about phase 1 inoculation. Highly anticipated this webinar has been, and we are very, very grateful that so many South Africans have shown such deep concern for this rollout strategy, which is indeed one of the most historic and important ventures that we'll be undertaking as a nation. We do have 2 hours ahead of us, and we would like to ensure that we use that time effectively. And so, without much further ado, I will ask the Minister of Health to begin these proceedings, and I will be back straight after the Minister of Health to then take us through the rest of the program. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lwazi Manzi, the Deputy Minister, Dr. Joe Pahla, Director General for Health, Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, esteemed panelists, senior officials in the Department of Health, colleagues in healthcare, and members of the media and fellow South Africans. Thank you for the opportunity to expand on the vaccination strategy and provide more details on the phase 1 of the national SARS-CoV-2 vaccination campaign. We know that the nation has been keenly anticipating the arrival of the batch of vaccines from the Serum Institute of India. I'm therefore pleased to announce that the flight carrying the first 1 million doses will leave India on Sunday, the 31st of January, 2021, fly via Dubai and land at OR Tambo International Airport on Monday, the 1st of February, 2021, at the time which will confirm closer to the day. We will afford the media an opportunity to document this historic occasion, albeit with limited access due to the regulations of the Disaster Management Act. Our communicators will relate the details of this arrival in due course. After the arrival of the vaccine, they will undergo some technical processes of quarantine, which is specified in the law, quality assurance, reconciliation, how many vials are there, how many are broken, how many needs to be returned back, and all of those issues. These are all necessary for the safe distribution of the vaccine. These processes will take a minimum of 10 days and a maximum of 14 days to complete, upon which we will then be ready to distribute the vaccines to all the provinces. The National Vaccination Campaign is a government-led initiative necessarily supported by other sectors, such as the civil society, the unions, the private sector. The framework that will be presented tonight has received support from these and various other players to ensure that we achieve our goal of population immunity or herd immunity by the time we get towards the end of the year. As a government-led initiative, Treasury has put its full weight and its support behind the program, and I must take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Finance and Treasury officials, in particular the Chief Procurement Officer, for the close working relationship that has defined the processes of procuring the vaccines. They've ensured that that there are no undue delays. They've granted us all the necessary deviations that we have requested and committed to financing additional orders. Just this afternoon, Treasury met in a 3-a-side meeting with the Department of Health and Business. This type of multi-sectoral collaboration has borne the fruit we need to fuel our ambitious program. As we announced in the statement on the 22nd of January 2021, the Department of Health has made direct application to SAPRA for Section 21 authorization to supply the SII and Astrazeneca vaccine. This approval has been granted, and we do have the CEO of SAPRA, Dr. Boitumelo Simete Mokokotleka, here to take us through the authorization and how it will translate on the ground, as well as the processes envisaged for authorization of the candidates that will be used in the country. Another regulatory hurdle we had to manage was the GMO regulations under the Department of Agriculture that need to be adhered to for the importation of organic goods derived from genetic modification. It gives us pleasure to confirm that the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development has signed regulations to waive the 30-day consultation period so that the agency of the vaccine rollout can be accommodated. This is in line with the requirements of agency under the disaster management situation. We're therefore pleased that from a regulatory standpoint, we are cleared to move ahead with the rollout of the vaccine and the mass inoculation campaign. Today, I'm joined by senior officials from the Department of Health, whom we will invite shortly to take us through the details of the phase 1 inoculation. I'm also grateful to be joined by the representatives from the private sector, professional bodies, community pharmacies, business and healthcare funders, as this is a culmination of many months of engagements, hard work and cooperation across sectors to ensure that we have a coordinated and well-capacitated vaccination program. I thank all these esteemed colleagues for joining us tonight, and we look forward to their critical contributions. To conclude, therefore, I wish to acknowledge that as a country, for us to expect our first consignment of vaccines less than a year after the first case of COVID-19 was recorded is a massive achievement of unprecedented proportions. And this is thanks to the coordinated and focused efforts of the international scientific community, researchers, clinicians, and experts, as well as the cooperation of the various departments of government. However, today I want to pay special tribute to those fearless compatriots who volunteered to participate in the trials, doing so without knowing whether they are getting the vaccine or placebo. Let us not forget these heroes who defied all anxieties and chose to be of service for the greater cause. It's only through human trials that we can truly establish the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. They were those humans. We thank them for the noble contribution which has brought us to where we are today. Without much further ado, let us then get into the business of this webinar. I'll therefore revert back to Dr. Manzi to introduce the first speaker for today. And at the end of it, there will be an opportunity for us to answer some of the questions that you might wish to pose. Thank you very much. Please, Dr. Manzi, if you can proceed from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. I must tell you, Minister, that the excitement is absolutely fever pitch. As you were talking, I was receiving phone calls from journalists saying, goodness me, all this breaking news. Thank you very much, Minister. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the public through the details of the phase 1 inoculation plan. Just to take the public just through the program itself for this evening, we have had our opening remarks from the Honourable Minister. We will now have Professor Barry Shoop, who's going to talk about how vaccines were made so that we all understand exactly what goes into the technology of making vaccines. We will then have Dr. Anban Pillay from the Department of Health, the Deputy Director General, take us through the different vaccines, their efficacy, how they get used, and their safety profiles as well. We will then get our information systems guru, Ms. Melanie Wilmerans, to then take us through the electronic vaccination system. This is the system which we said would be the system where we capture all those who are going to be inoculated and ensure that we can keep track of their inoculation and issue the inoculation certificates. Then Dr. Aquina Tulari from the Department of Health as well will take us through the service delivery model and funding. And we'll talk a little bit more about what will go into that particular discussion when we get to her segment. We will then have Professor Kollega Mlisana, who will give us a talk on misinformation as an expert in the fields of virology and epidemiology. We will then have Dr. Boitumelo Semete Mukukotlela, who will talk to us from SAPRA, as the CEO of SAPRA, on the Section 21 approvals, the details thereof, safety and pharmacovigilance that SAPRA undertakes with the vaccines. Thereafter, we will have a question and answer session, and we have tried to set aside quite enough time so that we are able to exhaust all the questions. And we will then have the Deputy Minister and the Minister closing for us by first addressing our people in vernacular, and then the Deputy Minister will then close the session for us. And so, without much further ado, I would like to invite Chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Vaccines, Professor Barry Shu, to give us a presentation on how vaccines are developed. Professor Shu, I see you there. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manzi, for that introduction. Honourable Minister, Honourable Deputy Minister, the Director General, all protocols observed. Thank you very much and good evening to everybody. My job, as Dr. Manzi said, is to really give a very brief overview of how these vaccines are made. So I'm going to spring right into my slide presentation. I just need to have permission to open the slides. The moment I'm disabled. Otherwise, I wonder if the host can just give me. Oh,
okay,
right.
Professor Shib, my apologies. It looks like you will be able to share your screen now. Thank you.
Doesn't seem to want to. Disabled, it's disabled. It's not allowing me to share.
Professor, we'll just attend to the technical problem at the moment. Thank you and apologies.
I hope it's not infected by a virus. Sure, I'll speak without.
Shu, are you, we have made you a co-host. If you're not able to share the presentation, I think if Professor can just go ahead and just present without the presentations.
Okay.
If that
I'll speak without. No, that's fine. All right. Our classical way in which viral vaccines were made. Sorry.
Can you see if you can try again? We have made Professor the host now. Let's just try again.
No, it says disabled. The host has disabled my participant to screen sharing.
Okay. No, please go ahead, Prof.
Okay.
Please go ahead without the presentations.
Okay. You'll have to just imagine what I'm saying then, graphically. Okay. The classical way in which vaccines, particularly viral vaccines, were made were really threefold. One either took the virus and attenuated, in other words, grew it in an unnatural environment and thereby changed the ability of the virus to cause disease. The virus was still able to infect the host and thereby stimulate the immunity. And those we call live attenuated viral vaccines. There are a number of examples: measles, mumps, rubella, oral polio vaccine, yellow fever vaccine, and so on. The second way is to take the virus and inactivate or kill it. And we do it either by heating or chemical inactivation. And again, the inactivated polio vaccine, the hepatitis vaccine. These are examples of inactivated whole virus vaccine. And then the third way is to actually extract the critical proteins which are needed to stimulate the immune system and use that as the vaccine. So these are the three classical ways in which are used to make vaccine. And there are numerous examples of all three of these. Now what's happened with the coronavirus, or the cause of COVID, is that there are now additional modern ways of making vaccines, ways which we had not used before. Now, the critical part of the coronavirus is those spikes, those outer proteins on the outside of the virus. These spikes are what attaches the virus onto the receptor site in the cells that the virus is going to infect, and thereby establish infection in the host. So it's the spike protein, and it's particularly the part of the spike protein which attaches the receptor site. We call that the receptor binding domain. And the idea of a vaccine is to stimulate immunity in the host, so that the host will make antibodies as well as immunocompetent cells to stop that spike protein, the receptor binding protein of the spike protein, attaching to receptor sites. So there are various ways in which, in fact, various imaginative ways in which these vaccines are now being developed. Up to now, they're close on 300. There are about 292 prototype vaccines which are being investigated in different kinds of ways, using the classical ways, but also using novel ways to make coronavirus vaccines. Now, of these, there are really 6 vaccines which are in common use today, from those 290 which are still being developed. There's the Astrazeneca vaccine, there's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there's the Moderna vaccine, there's the Pfizer vaccine, there's the Chinese vaccine, the Sinopharm from China, and the Sputnik vaccine from Russia. Now, 2 of these vaccines use what we call messenger RNA. Remember, the virus itself, the genetic code of the virus, is actually an RNA strand, a single RNA strand. So how the mRNA vaccine works is that the particular part of that strand is snipped out. It's that part which will code for the spike protein, and in particular, the receptor binding domain. That's snipped out. Now, messenger RNA is a very, very fragile molecule. It can't be used as such. It has to be protected some way. So it's put into a lipid, a nanoparticle, a tiny, tiny lipid particle, a fatty particle, to encase it and protect it. Also, that's why the Pfizer vaccine is so sensitive to heat. It's got to be stored at -70, because the mRNA is very, very fragile. The lipid particle then gets injected into the arm. It's taken up by the muscle cells at the injection site, and the RNA then gets into the muscle cells. Once it's in the muscle cells, it can then translate the spike protein and the receptor binding domain of the spike protein, and thereby stimulates the immune system. So that's how the messenger RNA vaccine will work. That RNA, remember, is a very fragile molecule. It doesn't last long in the muscle cell. It's quite rapidly degraded after it's done its work of producing that protein. So that's the one group of vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. The Astrazeneca vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and the Russian Sputnik vaccine, they are a little bit similar, but quite different. The way they work is that one takes that relevant piece of RNA, and that's spliced into a carrier virus. The virus which is used is called adenovirus. It's the virus which doesn't infect human beings, but is usually a trivial cause of trivial illness. But the AstraZeneca, what they use a chimpanzee. In other words, a non-human primate adenovirus, which infects non-human primates, but doesn't infect human beings. Now that's used to carry that RNA into the cells. That adenovirus doesn't multiply. It's just used as a vehicle to get the RNA into the muscle cells. And again, it's the same process. The RNA then codes for the protein stimulates the immune system. The Johnson & Johnson used another adenovirus. It's a human one, but also one which doesn't cause any illness, adeno26, and the Russian one uses 2, an adeno5 and adeno26, but it's the same process. The Chinese virus, the Sinopharm virus, that uses actually one of the classical ways. They grow up the virus and they inactivate it. That's whole virus, and it's obviously the proteins of that virus itself will stimulate the immune system. Now, there are other ways of making viral vaccines. None of them have yet been licensed. These are the three main, or actually the two main techniques in those three vaccines which are used. So that's a very, very brief overview of how these vaccines are prepared and how they work in stimulating the immune system. Thank you, Dr. Manzi. I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Shub, for that explanation. I see that Dr. Anban Pillay is ready to go with his slides, and thank you, Dr. Pillay. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see the slides. I'm just going to take you through the overview of the vaccines that we are looking at, and some that are coming in that the minister announced. If we go to the next slide, which is the Astrazeneca vaccine, you can see that this vaccine, which is being produced by the Serum Institute, is called the Kovi vaccine. It uses a viral vector technology. Its efficacy is between 62 and 90%, depending on the type of trials that have been reported on. It's a two-dose vaccine. The dosing interval varies. In some of the trials, it's been 4 weeks, but it can go up to 12 weeks. It's administered in the deltoid muscle with a needle and syringe. I think you would have seen that on TV in some of the countries. It's a fully liquid vaccine, so it doesn't have to be diluted. The good news about it is that it can be stored between 2 and 8 degrees. The side effects are fairly mild to moderate. From the reports that we've had thus far, the side effects relate largely to tenderness in the injection site, headache, fatigue, myalgia, pyrexia, and a bit of chills. But these are usually only for a few days. Most vaccines probably have the similar effect in terms of the immune response, and individuals may experience these. But again, just to emphasize that these are very mild symptoms. Coming next to the Pfizer vaccine, this is an mRNA vaccine. Its efficacy is 95%. It is a two-dose vaccine as well. The dosing interval here is 21 days apart. It's administered in exactly the same way as the AstraZeneca vaccine. This vaccine does require some reconstitution, which means that it'll have to be mixed. And once it's mixed, it lasts for about 6 hours. So very important in our program is to make sure that we have sufficient people to be vaccinated once a vial has been diluted to prevent wastage of the vaccine. The challenge with the vaccine is that it's stored at -70 degrees. At the vaccination site, it can be kept to between 2 to 8 degrees for about 120 hours. The side effects fairly similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine in terms of the most common side effects. They have been particularly as they relate to polyethylene glycol, PEG. But I think it's important to bear in mind that this vaccine is currently the most widely used vaccine since it was the first one out of the blocks. So we're probably hearing a lot about this, but as the other vaccines are being used, we'll have more information about them. This vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, is not registered as yet, but we're certainly waiting for the registration. We anticipate the phase 3 studies coming out this week, hopefully, which will tell us a lot about the efficacy and the safety of the vaccine. It's given in exactly the same way. The great advantage of this vaccine is it's a single dose vaccine, so you don't need to come back for your second dose. And it's stored as well between 2 to 8 degrees. The side effects that were reported with this vaccine as well, very mild, similar side effects to the others. Pain at the injection site, a bit of fatigue and headache. As I said, very, very short-lived from all the data that we have. Then the vaccine that comes out of China, the Synovac vaccine. This vaccine is an inactivated virus. Its efficacy seems to range between 50 to 70%. We don't have large trials to rely on here, and some of the small trials is what we're reporting on. It's not registered here yet, but it is being used in a number of countries. It's a two-dose vaccine, 14-day interval in between, administered in exactly the same way. and is also stored between 2 to 8 degrees, and the reports about side effects are very similar. Coming to the Sputnik 5 or V vaccine, this vaccine is produced in Russia. This is an adenovirus vector vaccine, efficacy around 92%, a 2-dose vaccine as well, with a 21-day interval in between. It's storage between 2 to 8 degrees. It does require a diluent as well because it's freeze-dried. The side effects are mild and very similar to the other vaccines in terms of the side effects that have been reported with this vaccine. And then finally, the Moderna vaccine. This vaccine is an mRNA vaccine, similar to the Pfizer vaccine, with efficacy close to that as well, 94.5. A 2-dose vaccine with a 28-day interval, administered in exactly the same way in the deltoid muscle. Its storage is not -70, it's -20, which means it can be kept in the freezer. And at the vaccination site, you can keep it between 2 to 8 for 30 days, which is quite helpful. Side effects, similar profile to the other vaccines. And it also has polyethylene glycol, which would probably cause some allergies in people that are allergic to that. So similar side effect profile to the Pfizer vaccine. I will stop at that point, Dr. Manzi. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Pele, for that very informative presentation. And now we will invite Ms. Mulani Wilmerans to then take us through the electronic system. This is obviously a very important aspect of the rollout strategy to ensure that everybody can be recorded and that we can keep track of everybody who is receiving their vaccines. May I check that we are ready to share Ms. Wilmerans' presentations?
Good evening, Lwazi. I cannot manage to share. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I'm going to give an opportunity for the admin to release, and Ms. Wilmerans,
I can screen, I can share now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, good evening, Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, colleagues, panelists, everybody that's on this webinar. It's my task to just give a very short overview of the EVDS. The EVDS stands for Electronic Vaccine Data System. This is an integrated online system that will allow us to capture all the relevant data that is associated with the administration of the vaccine. It's a data secure platform. It's a platform that has been built with an enterprise architecture that complies with national and international security standards. We've built in quite a number of controls that will allow us to, the system to enable processes for effectiveness and efficiency. I'm just going to give you a very short snapshot of the EVDS. So in terms of the electronic vaccine data system, the process for phase 1 starts here at number 1, which will, for healthcare workers to be enrolled for the vaccination. And this is linked to an electronic online application, which I will share more information with you just now. The second step is where the healthcare worker that on this platform will be receiving a message to say that you have, you can go at this date to this place to go and receive your vaccine. The healthcare worker vaccinee, in this case for phase 1, will then go to that vaccination site with their ID book and their medical aid details if they are on a medical aid. They will also receive an SMS from the system to say that they can take to the site, And on that SMS, there will be a vaccination code, which they will show to the vaccinator at the vaccination site. The vaccinator confirm that they are eligible to receive the vaccine and also confirm vaccine consent. After that, the vaccinator will give the jab or administer the vaccine. It captures the required information on the EVDS, records the vaccination code that comes from the SMS. The healthcare worker will receive a message, an SMS message, that they have received the first dose of the vaccine, and they will receive a message to say when they can receive their second dose. And this is the whole process for the EVDS in terms of supporting the vaccine administration. At the end of this, after the second dose, the vaccinee will be able to access through a secure platform an electronic vaccination certificate. And this whole vaccination process that is supported by the EVDS is also linked to the supply chain management, so that we ensure that when a vaccinee arrives at the vaccination center, there is enough supply to be able to vaccinate the vaccinees. The next part that I quickly want to zoom into, which is very important and that will go live very soon, is the online vaccine self-registration for healthcare workers. This is an online application that can be accessed via a cell phone or via the internet on your computer, and it will just capture basic information to be able to then assign you or to tell you to which vaccination site to go, as well as on which date you can receive your vaccine. So we are saying that it's a vaccination appointment, and if you register on this platform, you will get an appointment and you will be sure that you receive your vaccine at that vaccination site. Everybody, all the healthcare workers that register, they will just submit very general information, and one of the fields that they would complete is just their place of work. We will then use this and we will then look at the registered vaccination site, and then we'll allocate where the vaccines is available, and we will allocate this individual to go to this vaccination site to receive their vaccine. The information that is provided on this portal, we will also use this to communicate with those that's registered on the portal about the vaccination program, where it's necessary, and the communication will be through this application. All healthcare workers, public, private, clinical, non-clinical, should register online on this platform. This will allow us to communicate with you when and where you can receive your vaccine. How will you know when this portal is alive and that you can register? There will be extensive communication to inform everybody, all healthcare workers, through different platforms and mechanisms. Some of these that we've already started populating is social media, professional organization, healthcare worker, the employers of the healthcare workers, as well as the labor unions. And thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Wilmerans, for that. And I hope this does give reassurance to track all inoculees. Now, I have been requested to move the segment service delivery model and funding to the end, as Dr. Aquina Tulari is having activities in circumstances that surround digital communications. But what we will do then is that I will ask Professor Kollega Mlisana to then start getting ready to present on myths and misinformation. I see that Professor Lisana has been enabled to be able to share her screen. I'll give her an opportunity to do so. There we go. Thank you so much, Professor. Please, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manzi, and Honorable Minister and the Deputy Minister and everybody, all the colleagues on the webinar. It gives me great pleasure just to talk a little bit about the myths and the misinformation surrounding vaccines. And I'm smiling because there's a lot of information that's going out there and it can be confusing. But I think we really just need to, make sure that we know we know where to find the correct information, and we will be fine. And I'm trying to move my slides, and I'm not sure why it's not moving. Okay, all right. So I thought where I will start actually is just to define, when we're talking about myths and misinformation, what is a myth? It basically, everybody knows that it's a widely held but false belief or idea. And I could not resist not to translate this. NgesiZulu sithi myth inganekwane. Itori sixoxa labantu izingane ezincane mazikhula. And in Xhosa kuthiwa yintsomi, which is really just a belief that we all know which is false. Now, what about misinformation? It is when we're talking about false or inaccurate information. And there's even a new word that now is called disinformation, which talks to a false or misleading information that is spread deliberately, and the emphasis being on deliberate. So we really need to be careful about disinformation as South Africans. There's a lot of talks about 5G and viruses, but really let's just be all clear that viruses cannot travel on radio waves or mobile networks. They are not able to do that. And therefore, the 5G mobile networks do not spread COVID-19. In fact, we all know how the viruses spread. And in fact, we have seen the virus spreading in countries that don't even have 5G mobile networks. So really, there is no way that we can get the virus being transmitted just because we've got a 5G. That does not happen. I put this one up because I thought I just want to show people the magnitude of COVID cases. If you look at us as the country, we are sitting in very, right on top there as Africa, as a continent. And you look at the rest of the other countries, the numbers of cases. So really, when we're looking at numbers, people are often associating all these myths with some of the US, citizens. But if you're looking at the US, it has got 30.5 million cases compared to 3.48 million cases in Africa. And as we all know that within our country, we've got 1.42. So you can see that the magnitude of cases is not in Africa, but it actually is in the US and in other countries as depicted by this graph here. And secondly, what about deaths? Is the virus here to destroy, the Africans? If you're looking at deaths, there are more deaths, way more deaths in the US compared to deaths in Africa. And really, when we look at all this, there are far more deaths in the West than in Africa. Then, what about the vaccine itself? I keep saying this, that the advantage that we have as a country is that there are other countries that have already started vaccinating. As we speak, this was yesterday, more than 71 million doses have already been administered. So we are able to look at those and we're able to follow, and look at adverse events. And as Dr. Pillay has already mentioned, really the adverse effects that have been documented have been mild. So we've got the advantage that more than 70 million of people have already had the vaccine. And in fact, this is the vaccine doses, but if you're looking at those that have received the two doses for those vaccines that need 2 doses, 6.56 million already have already been fully vaccinated. And so we can monitor, and there has been nothing untoward that we have seen thus far. So basically, we need to know that vaccination saves lives. And as Dr. Pillay showed, it actually, a vaccine, the vaccine vials contain more than just one dose. It's all fluid. And so there is no way there could be a microchip or a tracking device in that vial, because that one vial will actually be used for more than, there's some that contain up to 5 doses and even more. So really, all vaccine ingredients, they get declared to the regulatory body. So when the SAPRA, evaluates and looks through the dossiers of any company that wants to bring a vaccine, it's mandatory that the full ingredients that are in the vaccine are declared. So there is no vaccine that has got a microchip or a tracking device. Will these vaccines alter our DNA? The answer is no. There's no vaccine that is going to alter the DNA. As Professor Shub has eloquently described to us how these vaccines work, if we're looking at the messenger RNA vaccines, all that they actually are a set of instructions that then inform the cells of the body to make these proteins, which then the body responds to in stimulating an immune response and prevent or fight the disease. So it is not going to alter the DNA, not, in whatever form. And really, I just want, as I'm finishing off, to say, we are a nation that vaccinates. We vaccinate our children. Every mother knows that they must keep their road to health chart and they go and vaccinate and get their children immunized. In fact, if you're looking at our childhood immunization coverage is above 80%, and this was in 2019. And therefore, my message tonight is that we need to know that even if the government can bring the best vaccines, vaccines do not save lives per se, but it is vaccination. So which means we all need to line up to get vaccinated so that we can actually make an impact and make sure that we reduce, and hopefully we get to a stage where we talk about herd immunity. And the last bit I want to say, to us as South Africans, please let's get into the habit of checking whatever information that you come across. Don't accept things at face value. Don't believe everything that you read on WhatsApp messages, but check the facts and make sure that you protect yourself and you vaccinate against COVID-19. Thank you very much, Manzi. Lwazi, sorry.
Thank you very much, Professor Mlisana. Your authority and expertise is really an important voice, and we really, really appreciate that you have come to share your message with us. Every mother knows that you must vaccinate. Now I'm going to invite Dr. Boitumelo Simete Mukukotlela, the CEO of SAPRA, to talk to us about the Section 21 authorization, as well as safety and pharmacovigilance that is undertaken by the regulator. CEO, are you ready to share your slides, or are you enabled?
I'm going to try again. Thank you very much, Dr. Lwazi. I'm ready to share my slides. I hope you can see.
Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just put it on. Good evening, Minister. Good evening, members of the MAC Advisory and other colleagues, and good evening to the viewers. So as indicated, SAPRA will share an update on the regulatory status of the various vaccines, but I'll do a deep dive on the specific one that has recently been authorized. So in terms of applications that are currently in our pipeline, you've heard of a number that are still in development and some that are authorized by other countries. However, as we sit at the moment, we've got the Janssen vaccine that is currently under what we call a rolling review submission, and this is currently ongoing. We then have the Serum Institute Astrazeneca vaccine, which we recently issued a Section 21 authorization on, and this is a vaccine that has market authorization, conditional market authorization by the European Medicines Agency. It has emergency use listing in the UK, and it also has emergency use listing in India. We also received an application from Pfizer for their vaccine, which currently has emergency use listing in the UK, the US, as well as a WHO emergency use listing. And this is also under review by SAPRA. I'll do a deep dive on the Section 21 process that we followed. Again, it is to give the public confidence, as Prof. Koleka was saying, that SAPRA follows quite a rigorous process in getting to a position where they determine the safety, efficacy, and quality of a medicine. So Section 21 is a mechanism that we utilize, and it's under the Medicines Act, to grant access to unregistered medicines. So this is what when you see with other regulators, they would typically call it emergency use authorization. What we do with this mechanism is that we make a product available for a specific period of time that we determine. Again, it's applied where there are conventional therapies that have been ruled out or that have failed or are unavailable in the South African market. They also, where we apply Section 21 is where there are specific quantities or specific individuals or patients that need to access the product urgently. And this is the case now with the Kovi vaccine, wherein you note the specific quantities and a very specific cohort wherein it will be rolled out in this initial phase of our national rollout program. Again, we issued where there's adequate scientific data that clearly indicates the risk and clinical benefit. In this review process, we always have regard to the health product safety, efficacy, and quality. And as I've indicated, this is a product that a mechanism that we've utilized extensively in the past. Even when it comes to COVID, we've utilized it for remdesivir, we've utilized it for the serology tests that are currently available, etc. So the specific product then that has this Section 21 application, the Department of Health was the applicant. It is manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. As indicated by Dr. Anban Pillay, we're expecting about 1.5 million doses, and that's what we've authorized. And again, this is targeted to the healthcare workers. We went through quite a rigorous and a very thorough process as SAPRA. We put together a working group of experts that are very, very much knowledgeable in the area of vaccines and clinical vaccine virology, etc. And we looked at the following: the quality of the product, where the product is manufactured. We looked at its clinical efficacy. We also looked at its safety and post-access monitoring, which also includes pharmacovigilance reporting requirements, and I'll speak to these briefly. So when it comes to quality, we look at the manufacturing process, that is it an appropriately validated process. In this case, because Astrazeneca had entered into a technology transfer agreement with the Serum Institute, we needed to ensure that the product that comes out of the Serum Institute is comparable to the product that is then manufactured by AstraZeneca. So we had a lot of scientific data around that. We also looked at what we call the release specifications by AstraZeneca for this product of the Serum Institute. Again, when the product arrives in South Africa, we do what we call a lot release, and this is to test and verify the quality of the vaccine that is available in South Africa. So in this case, with this Kovi vaccine, when the product leaves India, it will go through a lot release by the Indian National Control Laboratory. When it arrives in South Africa, it will undergo a further lot release verification, and this will be conducted by our South African National Control Lab. These are labs that are all under the WHO guideline, and they always are collaborating on their protocols and on their processes. So we're quite comfortable with the quality of work that comes from both these labs. When it comes to the facility itself, we had to, again, ensure that we are quite comfortable with the quality of the manufacturing and that the manufacturing process, it complies with good manufacturing practices. So we reviewed the acceptability of the site with respect to good manufacturing practices. Again, this is a site that we have evaluated as SAPRA in the past. They have received a GMP status before, so it's a site that we are quite familiar with as a regulatory authority. We also did, when it comes specifically to this vaccine, we did an additional desktop review of the process that is specifically utilized to manufacture this vaccine, and we were quite confident and comfortable that it still complies with good manufacturing practices. Again, as I've indicated, this is a company that we've dealt with before, the Serum Institute of India. They do have GMP approval from SAPRA for other vaccines that are available in South Africa, being the BCG vaccine as well as the rotavirus vaccine. When it comes to the clinical efficacy of this product, we looked at the preclinical studies as well as the phase 1 and the phase 2 clinical studies. We reviewed these and we found them to be acceptable, and that the safety and the efficacy outcomes were acceptable. We also reviewed the early results of the ongoing phase 3 trial. And again, there's a trial that is ongoing on this product in the country, and we were satisfied with the safety as well as the efficacy data that was provided from these early results from this phase 3 clinical trial. Very important, because I know we'll probably get a question around how quickly these vaccines were developed. Are we certain about their safety? How are we going to ensure continuous monitoring? So we've got a very detailed program that we've put in place. And again, it starts with the manufacturer providing periodic reports on what we call the worldwide database on a 6-monthly basis, as these vaccines are made available across the world. Again, the manufacturer will provide us with a summary report of these periodic safety updates on a monthly basis. But furthermore, we will be also getting and working very closely with the Department of Health to get reports on any adverse events following immunization. In our process as SAPRA, we also need to do an annual review of the drug safety information after the depletion of a specific stock. As indicated, the matter of the adverse events following immunization is quite important, and we'll be working with the Department of Health in that. Where there are serious effects, we will receive these reports on a 24-hourly basis. We will then assess that and we will act accordingly. Where there are non-serious, as some that you've seen already being reported, we'll get these reports on a 7-day basis. Furthermore, to ensure that we continuously monitor this product as it's been available to us as in South Africa, we will do what we call Pharmacovigilance Assessment of its safety. We will do very thorough reporting, monitoring, and we've put in place a reporting tool that will be utilized. And this is called the MedSafety app. This has been developed in partnership with the MHRA. This is the Health Products Regulatory Authority in the UK, and we're working with other African countries, again, around this medicine safety app. We've designed the app so that it's simple to use. It will be available on Apple products, on Android products, but also it will be available on our website, as well as the Department of Health's website. In instances where we don't have these digital platforms available, there will be a soft copy, a hard copy document form that is available that will be utilized at the facility to report any side effects. And this is exactly the same form as what you see on our, that will be on our website. Again, there's been a number of awareness programs that have been held with healthcare professionals around the profiles of these vaccines, on how to report these adverse effects following immunization, utilizing this app. Also, some of you may have heard about these breakthrough infections. So that is where if you receive a vaccine, you may also get infected. Again, because we are aligning the MedSafety app with the current testing web-based tool, we will be able to link the two and detect any breakthrough infections. Issues such as causality assessment, so that's where we look at what is the relationship between a specific adverse effect and an individual having been vaccinated. We will do those regularly. And again, I can't stress the importance of having to report, and we'll definitely engage with the media, with the public around this MedSafety app in the next few days. So this app enables us to do a passive surveillance wherein you can spontaneously report utilizing your mobile device, logging onto our website, and provide us with all the details around how you're feeling and if you're experiencing any adverse side effects. We can also utilize it to actively monitor specific recipients of the vaccine. And because of the way that it's structured, we are confident that we'll be able to get good quality data. It allows that we get reports from the healthcare practitioners, but also from the public. So we're expecting quite a large volume of data that we will be receiving, and we put in together a team that will be analyzing this data and continuously advising us on what is happening as these vaccines are being rolled out. Again, we will be able to see trends, and we will be then able to make decisions quite rapidly as we get this data. So just to conclude, the key messages that we would like to share are that as a health products regulator, we would like to give the public confidence that with this specific Section 21 authorization for the Kovi Shield vaccine, we've gone through a very rigorous review process with our expert working group that has extensive knowledge in this area. We also have worked, and we continue to work with other regulators across the world that we align with, and also with the WHO. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much to the CEO of SAPRA, and indeed let us take this opportunity to appreciate the regulator for getting us here. It is no mean feat to get us to this point where we are actually able to roll out the vaccines. I am now told that Dr. Tulare is available for the most anticipated segment of these presentations, and that is the service delivery model. Now, while Dr. Tulare is preparing her slides, when she is done, as the Minister of Health alluded to earlier, the service delivery model and the service delivery strategy is a multi-sectoral approach. And we are extremely fortunate this evening to be joined by representatives of the various sectors. On two together with the Department of Health in collaboration. Delivery and is very user friendly.
I'm sorry, Dr. Banzi. I think we need to check your sound. It might be getting interrupted, but you can proceed. But I think there have been a few comments that more people can't hear. So please just attend to it. Thank you. Please proceed, Dr. Tulare.
Thank you, Minister, Deputy Minister, co-panelists, and honored guests. I'm going to do a presentation on funding cost recovery and service delivery platform for phase 1 of the vaccination rollout. The purpose of the exercise of vaccinating is to achieve herd immunity against the COVID-19 virus. And based on the advice that we have received from the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Vaccination, 65% of the adult population needs to be vaccinated to ensure that the population has got the immunity that it needs. And if we look at the South African population, 65% translates to 40 million people in the population. And I'm going to break it down further, that if we think we have got 40 million people that requires vaccination, 7.1 million of this are insured in the private sector by medical schemes, whilst around 32.9 are what we call uninsured. If you look at the population of healthcare workers, which is going to be the purpose of this phase 1 inoculation exercise, we have got about 1.2 million public servants who are insured or who are working in the public sector, and both in health and other sectors, and about 350,000 are insured in the public sector, and 170,000 belong to GEMS. The vaccine itself has been designated as a public good, and it will be delivered free at the point of care, and its delivery is based on the principles of social solidarity, so that we look after each other, all of us in our society. The funding for the vaccine will be predominantly from the fiscus, but it will be augmented by private funding sources. And as indicated earlier on, there are various sources from which we are going to procure the vaccine, and I'm not going to elaborate on these further. Also to indicate and to re-emphasize that government will be the sole purchaser of the vaccine for the national vaccination program, and to secure access to vaccine, government will ensure that we do this at the lowest possible price that we can negotiate. An identified entity will receive the vaccine and act as a central distributor for the vaccination, for the vaccines on behalf of government, and this entity will recover costs on behalf of government. As Milani had presented earlier on, we are going to be using an electronic vaccine data system that will coordinate, ensure that facilities that are accredited are on the system, that we coordinate a supply of vaccines, the pre-booking system and the vaccination itself, recording who is vaccinated, who is not vaccinated, and also helping us with any other information that is going to be used for planning, execution, and monitoring of the vaccination. In terms of cost recovery, we have got 3 approaches to a cost recovery mechanism, and this entails looking at the insured patients, how we recover costs from insured patients, how funding will be meted out for uninsured patients, and also the participation of private sector, such as private hospitals, industries, corporates that want to assist in augmenting the funding of the vaccination program. Then I'm going to break down this presentation into what will happen to those persons who are insured. For persons who are insured, funding will be derived from medical schemes. And for these individuals or persons, the vaccine will be administered free at the point of vaccination, at the point of service. In the private sector, private providers, including pharmacies who want to provide services to the insured persons, they will procure the vaccine from the central distributor through their wholesalers using a mechanism that we call a single exit price. A single exit price is a mechanism that is defined in law through the Medicines and Related Substance Act, Section 22G. So it allows the country and government to publish a single exit price from which we can buy the services that we want to buy. Providers in the private sector will bill medical schemes for the cost of the vaccines, as well as the administration fee, and will be paid through what we call a prescribed minimum benefit. The prescribed minimum benefit is described and contained in the in the Medical Schemes Act, and it's a mechanism, one of the mechanisms for paying for benefits. We have already declared the vaccination for COVID-19 as a prescribed minimum benefit, which means that schemes are obliged to pay for this service. Schemes will be expected to pay directly to those that are providing services, whether it's hospitals, community pharmacies, general practitioners, or whatever mechanism that we are going to be using to provide the service. And they are going to pay this through what we call alternative reimbursement mechanisms, either prospectively or retrospectively, but it's going to be an inclusive fee and we call this a capitation fee. And in case of insured healthcare workers who want to be vaccinated in our public health facilities, the vaccine will be supplied to our public health facilities, but our public health facilities will be regarded as designated service providers that can be paid by medical schemes. And they will be able to claim from medical schemes, and the money will come back into government through a system where the funds are retained and go back into the fiscus via National Treasury. As indicated, even for insured persons, they have to go through pre-registration, they have to go through making a booking and coming into a facility that has been assigned to them in line with what Ms. Volmarans explained earlier on. So the electronic vaccine data system will be applicable in this instance. For those persons that are uninsured, and I had indicated that our population, we've got 32.9 persons who are eligible for vaccination, who are uninsured, and of this, even the healthcare workers, there is a proportion of these that are not insured. For this component of the population, the public sector is the preferred provider for the vaccination. And since vaccination is a public good, government will provide funding for this section of the population. Uninsured health workers will also be funded by government, and in other instances where, for example, they're in the private sector and there's a private employer who is willing to pay for their employee, they will be allowed to do so, and there is a mechanism that I will describe in the next slide of how they are going to do that. For the uninsured who are using our public facilities, the vaccine will be received from the central distributor, but our provincial departments and our districts will not be required to pay for the vaccine from the central distributors. In the private sector, if our uninsured population wishes to access service through private providers, the private providers will have to purchase the vaccine through the single exit price mechanism that I explained earlier on, and they will be purchasing this through their wholesalers from the central distributor. But also of importance is that no person, uninsured person or insured person, will be expected to pay when they access the vaccine. So vaccination will be free at the point of service. Where there is a need to augment the public sector capacity to provide services to uninsured persons, government may or will contract private providers based on need, their location, capacity, and other relevant considerations. This is not something new. Government has already embarked on contracting private providers, for example, with the distribution of medicines with a central chronic medicine dispensing and distribution system, the CCMDD, where we distribute medicines to remote areas through contracted providers such as pharmacies. So these contracted providers, as indicated, may include private pharmacies, general practitioners, and other providers in line with their scope of practice. Uninsured persons who may wish to access vaccination services through public facilities or accredited private providers will also have to undergo a system of pre-booking and also making an appointment, and also for them to have their vaccination recorded and collected into our EVDS. The contract that a government will be getting into with private providers will include a portion for administration fee that we have set between 50 and 60 Rand per patient, and this will be inclusive of VAT, and government will reimburse this to private providers. Of importance also is that our uninsured persons will need to have their identity document, and we have, as they are registering, if ever they are not on the health patient registration system that is already in existence in our facilities, then this will be activated so that we are sure that we are identifying the correct person. Then I had indicated that, you know, a private sector or corporates may wish to also provide funding and services for their employees. It is important that we recognize the participation of the private sector, because if we want to achieve herd immunity, we need to have a collaborative effort amongst all of us, amongst all key stakeholders. And business funding should be aimed at ensuring that we cross-subsidize the cost of herd immunity and the associated social and economic benefits of achieving this herd immunity. And a business may also opt to make a contribution through an identified mechanism to ensure that this herd immunity is achieved. Business has indicated that they would want to opt either to cover a population of the unemployed, the population that is uninsured, or the population that is residing in the vicinity of the places of work. And this they may do through their occupational healthcare services that are available at workplaces, or through contracting for such services. If ever services are procured for delivery of the vaccination through the private sector and corporate mechanism, they will have to procure the vaccine through the central distributor using a wholesaler, also at a single exit price. What we also want to be clear about is that if communities or employees are vaccinated, they are going to receive their vaccine free at the point of service, and the business or corporate will bear the cost. Persons wishing to access vaccination may do so through their workplaces, or if ever the employer identifies an accredited provider, whether it's a GP, it's a nurse, a practitioner, or it's a pharmacy, they may do so, but they are also going to be required to register through our electronic vaccine data system, and with pre-booking and recording of all the vaccination activity. In summary, therefore, let me say that if we have the public sector as a delivery platform, I'm going to break down what will be the role of medical aid schemes, the service providers, where the stock will be coming from, and the type of reimbursement. So for the public sector health facility, personnel who are on medical aid will have to be funded through their medical schemes. The services that are provided in the public sector hospitals or facility will be delivered through a vaccination team. And I just want to remind ourselves, we had said that the public sector must be a designated service provider for a scheme such as GEMS or any other scheme that is not GEMS. There are lots of other schemes that are covering public health sector employees, and these may also be a part of the process of paying the service provider, which will be the public health sector facility. The stock here will be public, but reimbursement will derive from the schemes, and it will be retained by Treasury through the DSP arrangements. For those personnel that are without a medical aid coverage, but they want to be receiving the service in the public sector, the services will still be delivered by a vaccination team. The stock will be none, but there won't be any need for reimbursement, since these are persons or the category that will be funded directly through the fiscus. If the service is delivered in the private sector and the person is on medical aid, and the services will be provided by the private health facility, the stock will be private. It will be procured through the single exit price from the central distributor via the wholesaler. and the provider will submit its claim to the medical scheme, and the medical scheme will reimburse the provider. The fiscus will retain the funding through the initial mechanism of purchasing from the central distributor. For personnel without medical aid, there are two options. Option one, where the services are provided by an employer through the occupational health service facilities at the workplace. The stock in this instance will be private, and the employer or the one who is going to be providing the service, either the corporates or other private role players, they will purchase their stock of vaccines from the central distributor at a single exit price, and the employer will supply the vaccine to the workplace or to an identified service provider. And the employer or the corporate will have to reimburse those that are providing services at the occupational health facilities. The other option is to refer those that are without medical aid back into the public sector, which is the preferred option for delivery. My last slide. If ever we are looking at a variety of platforms that we can use also to deliver, we have identified a critical component as private pharmacies that have got a guaranteed cold chain in their facilities. And they may opt to look at after medical aid patients or those that are without medical aid. In this context, the service provider will be the pharmacy, the stock will be private, and the pharmacies may either purchase as a group through their group purchasing mechanism, but they will also be purchasing from the central distributor at a single exit price, and medical schemes will reimburse directly to these pharmacy or pharmacy groups. If ever the person comes into a pharmacy but they do not have a medical aid, the pharmacy will have a stock that is derived from the public pool, and they will be reimbursed by the state vaccine cost with or without an administration fee. This will depend on the negotiations, and this will be similar to the central chronic medicine dispensing and distribution system that I described earlier on. Therefore, let me thank the Minister, the Deputy Minister, colleagues, and everyone for listening. I thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tulari, very much for articulating the service delivery model. And now, as we alluded to earlier, may I invite our partners to come through. I'm going to introduce each and every one of them. We will ask Dr. Zodwa Ngobese to first come through. Dr. Ngobese is an occupational medicine specialist running occupational health services for various parastatals and private entities throughout the country and in the private sector. She is also a health risk management specialist in the private sector. Dr. Ngobese, please unmute and let us see you, and please do come through with your contributions.
Thank you. I want to thank the Honorable Minister, the Deputy Minister, colleagues, fellow panel members, and fellow South Africans for this opportunity to support phase 1 of the vaccine rollout. All protocols observed. Occupational medicine services, we play a vital role in public health as a whole, in that we are the healthcare professionals working with employers in corporates, private sector, and public entities to manage work-related health issues and exposures. And we also provide primary healthcare services at the workplace. For that reason, COVID-19 has become one of the risks that we manage on a daily basis. It has become our so-called new normal to deal with the management of the risk of COVID-19 on productivity, quality of life, morale of employees, and the workforce as a whole. For private employers who opt to fund the rollout, and also for corporates, occupational health practitioners are well placed to be their foot soldiers. So we look forward to the delivery of COVID-19 rollout program. We view it as a game changer towards prevention of COVID-19 infections, not only locally, but also globally. And we wish to place on record that we wish to be the active promoters of this program in the workplace, because we believe that the health promotion we give to employees can also be shared and add value to their families. So we recognize that our country needs all hands on deck, and we fully support the program in its efforts to ensure and promote high levels of uptake of the vaccine in the country. We are a resource that has the capacity to do that. As some people say, we can, you can, we all can. Therefore, we wish to support government and enable our country to achieve herd immunity as quickly as possible, because we view the vaccine as the one critical public health measure toward stemming the spread of COVID-19 countrywide and globally. For that reason, we wish all South Africans to utilize existing health resources, including occupational health practitioners, as a source of information that will enable them to make decisions on whether to participate in the program or not. I thank you for these few minutes of your time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Ngobese. Let's move right along to Dr. Tutula Balfour. Now, Dr. Balfour is a public health medicine specialist and the head of health for the Minerals Council of South Africa. Very important figure in the landscape of healthcare in this country. Dr. Balfour, the floor is yours.
Very much, Chairperson. Honorable Minister, the Deputy Minister, all protocol observed. Thank you very much for this opportunity. There is no doubt that business, which is BUSA and B4SA, and the mining sector in particular, can play a major role in the end-to-end planning and rollout of the vaccine program to assist government and the nation. We see this as a very critical national effort. Business has stepped up, as it has done in the past, to offer its support to government in the distribution of vaccines to, in our case, mining employees and mining communities, in line with the clinically established national priorities. As Professor Mlisana had said, the key here is that it's not vaccines that are going to save us, it's vaccination. And therefore, our collective priority and responsibility as a nation is to get as many jabs in arms as possible, as quickly as possible, to save lives and livelihoods.
Hello.
Using our significant healthcare infrastructure and capacity, business, including the mining sector, could.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Dr. Balfour. Yeah. Dr. Balfour, please just pause there. Dr. Ngobese, please.
Let me just mute.
Dr. Manzi, you are muted, and I think Dr. Balfour is also muted.
Oh, okay, Dr. Balfour, apologies. We just needed to mute Dr. Ngobese. Please do come back and continue your contributions. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Balfour. Please continue your contributions. Thank you, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, sorry about that. I was saying that, you know, as business, which includes the mining sector, we've got significant healthcare infrastructure and capacity, which can be used to drive the vaccination process. And we hope to be designated as key points of care. It is time for agency and also partnership, and will play an important role with government and with trade unions. if we have the vaccine, we've actually worked that out that the industry can administer about 60,000 to 80,000 vaccines a day. So within 2 months, we could vaccinate between 2.5 million to 3 million people. We currently have a workforce of 450,000 people. So it would mean that we would be vaccinating at least 5 more people, per employee that we have. As business, we will look at how we will best support the funding of the vaccine program. I was listening to Dr. Tulare and the various permutations regarding support that can be provided. We are ready to step in, where required, to support the funding of the vaccine program. Lastly, a huge area we believe that we can make a difference on will be placing a focus on communication and education and reassurance of employees and communities, and ensuring that as many people as are able will take up the opportunity to be vaccinated. As we heard before, the critical issue here is to get herd immunity in South Africa, and we want to be part of achieving that goal. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balfour. And it really is very reassuring that the sector has got so much capacity, not only to communicate, but to also put chaps in arms. Thank you so much. Some of our viewers, television viewers, he's a family personality and advocate on TV and radio, social commentator, and host and owner of Dr. Fundi Digital Health Channel. Dr. Nyati, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, Deputy Minister, Dr. Joe Patla, eminent experts and co-panelists and many distinguished participants within this webinar. I've been asked to come and talk more as a primary care physician, which is, other people can see those as family doctors, but I play a role at different levels. One, yes, at primary care level, in communities, but also, I have a company that plays a role in health risk management or employee health and wellness programs, that is in workplaces, and then also the role as somebody who's got a digital channel and, gives opinion on media. Now, I think listening to Dr. Tulare, it's very important that primary care doctors, that is GPs, individually and also as groups, should be roped in to play a positive role, because if you look at the number of doctors that this country has, the majority of doctors are actually primary care, doctors. They are the nearest people to the communities. They have established relationships and trust by those communities, and if they are able to speak the local languages, they can play an important role in terms of public health education around the vaccines, answer questions, the myths, misinformation, disinformation. And so I'm saying for this program to succeed, and make sure that by the end of the year, the 2/3 or 7% is achieved, we need to have the primary care physicians playing an active role. They can make their practices available, as vaccination sites. And if they meet standards in terms of cold chain, they can be able to play a role to actually vaccinate, people. And so I'm saying, that engagement with organized primary care physicians needs to happen. Obviously, a lot of training that needs to take place so that they can play the roles that I've just mentioned. And then some of us, we also play a role in media, where we influence a lot, in terms of dealing with misinformation, disinformation, and, demystifying the myths. So in all of those roles that we play, workplaces, in the media, and in our practices, I think it's going to be very important for the department to partner, with this sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Fundi. And indeed, we do agree that the role of the family physicians, particularly the community family physicians, is particularly critical, not only in ensuring that we do achieve that herd immunity we keep talking about, but also in their ability to be able to communicate with the community members that they are so close to, and they know very well, and they know all their families and the uncles and everybody. So very, very important role that they play. Thank you very much. We'd now like to invite Ms. Melanie Da Costa, who is the Director of Strategy and Health Policy at Netcare and a member of the Private Sector Coordinating Committee of the National Coordinating Committee of Vaccine Rollout. She also participates in the B4SA platform for vaccines. That is the Business for SA platform for vaccines. Mr. Costa, the floor is yours as representative of the private sector and business.
Many thanks, Chair. So good evening, Minister, Deputy Minister, co-panelists and honoured guests, and all protocols observed. So Business for South Africa was incepted in March last year. It represents the depth and breadth of both large and small businesses, and it's with the express purposes of supporting the national response to COVID. And the vaccine is part of that process. So I just want to support or echo the Minister's words on the pressing need to vaccinate healthcare workers. We've unfortunately seen such a tragic loss of lives in the first two waves of the pandemic. And these are heroes, frontline staff that are trying to do the best they can to help our citizens and have an unintended consequence in the process. I can confirm that private hospitals in particular have been working hand in glove with the National Department of Health on ensuring a very successful start to the vaccine process. The reason for this is acute hospitals will be testing the IT systems and the logistical processes as we roll out effectively the first stage of phase 1, and we look after the healthcare workers closest to the most compromised of COVID-19 patients. So in that, we've engaged on the IT systems that have been presented and eloquently elaborated on by Melanie and Dr. Tulare. And Minister, we give you some comfort that the system looks very comprehensive. Today, we have finalized the uploading of the acute hospital vaccination sites into the system. And we have started the training process of vaccinators through the National Department of Health program. The next step, so we have also engaged the provinces on just understanding total private healthcare worker by province, by district, and even by acute hospital. We are now in the process of finalizing the registration of all the private healthcare worker data fields for that national electronic system. We're doing it through a central database to really try and make the department's life easier, and we'll be uploading it through a secure platform. The next step that we're also focused on is the logistics, and I see that there are a lot of questions that have been coming through on logistics. But in effect, if a South African gets an invitation for a vaccine and there is a set date, time and place, we want to ensure that when you arrive and you consent to a vaccine, that that vaccine is at said place. So those are the various steps that we're engaged on, and we just assure you that we're available 24/7 to ensure our readiness to vaccinate healthcare workers. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Costa. Those are very, very encouraging words. The carriages of this train are really starting to click together, and that is extremely encouraging. We would like to now invite from the nursing sector, probably the most critical and important sector in the rollout of these vaccines, Matron Dinah Morbedi. She is the nursing manager in the Eastern Cape Department of Health, also known as matron of the province, with 41 years experience in public sector nursing. She has been part of the team that provides psychosocial support to healthcare workers affected and infected by COVID-19 in the province, and is a leader in the nursing sector. And so, Matron Morbedi, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, Minister. Good evening, Deputy Minister, and my colleagues. It's an honor to speak on behalf of nursing tonight. In my whole 41 years as a nurse, I've never seen such high infections amongst nurses. I've never seen such high deaths among nurses. We used to hold services for nurses, Nurses Day, and we'd read out the nurses that have died in that year. In a hospital, you will read out maybe one nurse, 2, 3 nurses, but that we should start reading up to above 20 nurses in one institution that have died. This is really broken the back of the nurses. We always said nurses are the backbone, but our back is broken. But I'm encouraging our nurses that with the vaccine, the issue where we used to say the patient is my first consideration. It's no more about the patient. It's also about my family. My family needs to be protected. I need to, when I'm at work, be comfortable that my family is also protected. So taking the vaccine will not only ensure that I'm protected from getting infection, it will also protect my family. I will feel safer that my family is also protected, because I've seen colleagues, nurses can attest to that, of nurses who are not at work. She was here yesterday, today she's not here. She's infected. The third day she has died. So that is really encouraging us as nurses to take the vaccine so that we are protected, so that we feel safer in our workplaces. Because at the moment, we do not feel safe. We don't know when next we'll be infected. Despite the PPEs that are there, despite the encouragement from management that are there, we still see our heroes falling. Day by day, there's a hero that has fallen. Day by day, there's a nurse who's infected. So nurses, let us protect ourselves. Let us protect our families. Let's be encouraged to take the vaccine. And I must say, I've noticed that nurses are part of the teams that are going to implement the vaccine, and they will be able to participate so that all the healthcare workers that we are aiming to vaccinate are vaccinated. Thank you this evening that I'm able to encourage our nurses, and I'm hopeful that they will see the benefit of the vaccination. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Matron, and that was a very, very important, critical message for our most prized and most critical healthcare workers. We would now like to invite Dr. Stan Mulwaby. He's no stranger. He has joined us on several webinars, and of course, he is the Principal Officer of GEMS, and he will be talking on behalf of the funders. Dr. Mulwaby, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Lwazi. Good evening to the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, Honorable Deputy Minister Joe Pahla, the DG, Tate Buthelezi, the DDG, Dr. Anban Pillay, co-panelists and members of the media who are present. We are indeed honored to be afforded this opportunity to participate in this august occasion. By august occasion, I'm actually referring to both the webinar we are having tonight, but also to the program of the vaccine rollout. Without further ado, on behalf of GEMS, we hereby pledge our unfettered support for this enormous undertaking. Anybody who undertakes a massive project like this one, this vaccination initiative, must expect that there will be challenges along the way. We must expect and overcome what the naysayers say. And they are saying that we will not succeed. We must expect that there will be various hindrances and hiccups along the way. More importantly, but in no way of less significance, is the trust deficit that has resulted from the recent undertakings of similar nature. The procurement of PPEs and recently the sanitation or defogging of the Gauteng schools at a cost estimated to be around 430 million rands does not bode well for an undertaking of this nature. At this stage, I would love to say a word of appreciation for the healthcare workers who are at the forefront of fighting this pandemic. The road ahead is therefore littered with immense hindrances. However, we dare not fail the South African citizenry. I would love to leave you with the words of our icon, the indomitable Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." I thank you, Dr. Lwazi.
Well, thank you very much for those words, Dr. Mulwaby. And now, last but certainly not least, and then after the speaker, we will move on to the question and answer session. We will invite Mr. Khabo Gomape, who is a community pharmacist and chairperson of the Independent Community Pharmacy Association, representing more than 1,100 pharmacies across all the provinces. And we all know just how important the community pharmacy is to ourselves as our daily lives, the diverse services that they offer, and now they're about to add one more critical service to their portfolio of offerings. So, Mr. Gomape, over to you. The floor is
yours. Thank you, Dr. Manzi. Thank you for the flattering introduction. Greetings, Honorable Minister Mkhize, the Deputy Minister, Dr. Patla, the DG, Dr. Buthelezi, the DDG, Dr. Pillay, colleagues and fellow South Africans. My name is Khabo Gomape, and I'm the chair of the Independent Community Pharmacy Association. Firstly, I wish to commend the Department of Health, yourself, Minister, and the Ministerial Advisory Committee for the tireless work that you have been doing and are continuing to do, and for allowing us to be part of this important initiative. Now, the COVID-19 vaccine, we see it as the most important tool that we have at this current juncture to end this crippling pandemic, and it is imperative that we vaccinate the 40 million South Africans as quickly as possible to avoid further loss of life and trauma to our nation. Minister, between ICPA pharmacies and our fellow colleagues, the GP practices in the private sector, we are indeed ideally placed to add over 10,000 extra vaccination sites across our country. Now, the vaccine rollout and the massive spend that is happening currently and that will continue to make in this country should indeed strengthen the existing healthcare infrastructure, and it should not necessarily be used to generate profits for shareholders. Finally, Minister, in solidarity with government and for the sake of our population, ICPA, together with our partners, have been preparing for the past few months through engagements in the B4SA, the engagement with the Provincial Department of Health, as well as the National Department of Health. And therefore, I conclude by saying, we are willing, we are able, we are ready to play our part in this vaccination campaign. Pharmacies are indeed undoubtedly the backbone of primary health care in our country, and they should be commended for that. I just want to end by saying, South Africa, we encourage you, let's vaccinate and save lives as well as livelihoods. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gomape. And that ends the formal proceedings of this press briefing. We will now move on to the question and answer session. I will begin with the questions that are being posed by the media on my WhatsApp groups, and then we'll move on to the Q&As that are in the chat box. Although we must put out the disclaimer that it will be impossible to cover all of the questions and answers that have been posed, but we've also tried to maybe group them all in themes so that at least we are able to exhaust everybody's queries regarding the rollout strategy. It is 9:45, and the live broadcasters may elect to switch over to their normal programming once the 10 o'clock hour strikes. And so we really would like to take this opportunity before we go ahead with the questions to thank our broadcasters for taking the message of government and our partners, our sector partners, to the people of South Africa, to reassure them that we're all working together to ensure that they will be protected from COVID-19 in future through the vaccination program. Now we'll move on to the question and answer session, and I will begin with Kyle Cohen from News 24. Does the health department have all the supplies ready it will need in terms of auxiliary supplies such as cotton wool, needles, syringes, and swabs for the vaccine shots to be administered? How will these supplies be procured? And if I may, I think I will ask Dr. Anban Pillay to perhaps tackle that one. Then we have a question from Nadia Hannibal from NatVet 24. How will you check that a registered person is a frontline healthcare worker? What measure is used to ensure only frontline healthcare workers get prioritized during phase 1? She has two follow-up questions which say, what is the estimate timeline for the start of phase 2? And how do you classify people with underlying health issues? Are there fixed parameters? The third question is, at which point will companies be able to be part of mass immunization of employees? And will this be possible by winter of 2021? Can companies also provide vaccinations for employees who have medical insurance? Dr. Tulari, I think I'll ask you to tackle Nadia's questions. Estelle Ellis from the Daily Maverick asks, will foreign doctors working in SA also qualify for vaccination? I think maybe, Dr. Tulari, maybe you can also handle that one, or Dr. Anban Pillay. And then we have a query from Christian Duplessis from NatVet 24. Apparently the Astrazeneca vaccine is sensitive to light. What plans are in place to ensure it does not get damaged? Dr. Anban Pillay. And then last one from this set of questions is from Tamar Khan from Business Day. How will the private sector rate for vaccines be determined? That is, how will the SEP be set for each vaccine? And at what point will the President and members of Cabinet be vaccinated? Honourable Minister, perhaps that second part of the question can be yours, and the first part of the question can be taken by Dr. Anban Pillay. And she has a third question, which is, has the definition of essential worker been determined for phase 2, and does it differ from the essential worker list defined in the lockdown regulations? Thank you, panelists. I will stop there for now, and we can take the answers to those questions. Perhaps we can begin with the Honourable Minister, and then move on to Dr. Anban Pillay, and then Dr. Tulari.
I thought mine was the last one. The question of ministers is actually an interesting discussion. On the one side, we have had people who have said that the ministers and parliamentarians must be in the forefront, and they must do so, because some people were very skeptical, just to give confidence. On the other hand, others are also saying, well, why don't they wait for their turn on the queue? Others are saying that let's deal with the health workers and leave the political leaders for later. So we are going through that discussion just to see what might be best. But we believe that particularly those who are involved in the Interministerial Committee on vaccine should actually be actively involved, and they may be the ones that might be encouraged to participate in the earlier part of the vaccine, mainly to build the confidence that the issues of vaccine, its important issue is the safety, and the fact that it's important, it's necessary for all of us to take. So basically lead by example, as it were. So that matter has not been finalized, but that's where the discussion is at the moment. We did say earlier, there was someone who asked a question about when the vaccination will start. We did indicate in my opening that there will be a lot of processing that needs to be done, and the minimum is 10 days, maximum 14 days. That's the timeline within which we expect that the vaccine will be will be administered as soon as all of the processing would have been done, minimum 10 days. And so all the timelines have been put out there. So we anticipate that it should be possible around the second week of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Dr. Pillay.
Thank you, Dr. Manzi. So from the questions I have, firstly on the question relating to supplies, I think it's important to recognize that the supplies that are going to be used are used in the health system currently, and there are a number of contracts available to procure these items such as needles, syringes, swabs, PPE, etc. It's also important maybe to bear in mind that we currently have an extensive vaccination program that comes to close to 20 million South Africans every year that are vaccinated, or doses that are administered. So the health system is quite used to the vaccination program. Clearly, this is at a scale that's much higher than we previously delivered. But in terms of the specific supplies, we have quantified them, we have informed the suppliers, and the provincial health departments will engage with the suppliers to order from those suppliers that have been contracted to supply these items. We understand that there will be sufficient supplies of them. On the question about foreign doctors, well, all healthcare workers that are working on the platform will be part of phase 1. Whether they're of South African nationality or not is not relevant, because they're healthcare workers working on the platform, and we'll deal with that as such. Yes, the question about the light sensitivity of the Astrazeneca vaccine is noted, and I think there are a couple of other vaccines that also may have that challenge. The supplier is providing the vaccine in a packaging that protects it against light and it will be stored in the fridge. So we anticipate that will not really be a problem, although during training, I think it's important for us to emphasize that point, so that those that are involved with the vaccination program don't take the vials out of the packaging and expose them to light. How is the SEP calculated? The SEP is made up of a manufacturer price and a logistics fee and VAT. We have been in discussions with the industry about what the manufacturer portion would be, or what would be the cost price of the medicine as such, without the logistics portion, and we're going to add that on clearly so that it's an inclusive price with VAT. That's the way we would be putting the SEP together in terms of its various components. And then finally, the question around essential worker. Yes, we're using the definition that's available in the regulations. However, the Ministerial Advisory Committee has been engaging with other inputs of stakeholders that have proposed that that would need to be broadened, given some of the implications of essential workers in the context of vaccination. So I think the Ministerial Advisory Committee may have a revised list around essential workers as we move forward. Thank you. I'll stop there, Dr. Manzi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay. Dr. Tulare, any questions that you're picking up on?
I think the question that I wanted to respond to is around when will companies be allowed to procure and vaccinate. And part of the reason why we've established the Vaccine Coordinating Committee, the National Coordinating Committee on Vaccinations, and that committee, including a component of the private sector, is precisely to have the private sector involved in the planning of the execution of the vaccination program in that sector. And therefore, they are part and parcel of the planning. If they are responsible for healthcare workers, they are healthcare workers in line with how we've categorized them, will also be prioritized accordingly. But the most important thing is that they need to participate, they need to ensure that the information is provided to the platform that is planning for the program, and that we know who the health workers are. And then going forward, once we move into the second and third phase of the vaccine rollout, they should also be part and parcel of planning, so that we do understand the categories of the population that they intend covering. So they are part of the planning even at this stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tulari. Moving on to my second group, and there are about 5 questions here. The first couple of questions are from Vickersberger. The first question is partially covered, but he's drilling down into a little bit more detail. The question being, which healthcare workers will be prioritized during the first phase of the vaccination process? For instance, will a nurse in the Nazareth Field Hospital receive a vaccine before a plastic surgeon in private practice? Also, do all healthcare workers, including plastic surgeons, dermatologists, psychiatrists, etc., qualify to receive the vaccine during the first phase, or will some be exempted? If so, who and why? It goes on to also ask, will South Africa, and Mr. perhaps this one is for you, will South Africa beat this pandemic by end of 2021? Please explain why not. Will we be able to vaccinate 40 million South Africans by the end of the year to achieve herd immunity? Is this a realistic goal? I think the first question in regards to the prioritization of healthcare workers, either Dr. Tulari or Dr. Anban Pillay can take that one. Andrew Muldrum from Associated Press asks, and Dr. Pillay, I think this one would be for you, what is the price paid? Excuse me. He asks, what is the price paid for the 1.5 million doses of Astrazeneca vaccine? Did Serum charge a premium to deliver these vaccines quickly? And then I have another one from Vickersberger from Netvac24. When will the vaccination process have a significant impact on the infection and death rates? In other words, when can we expect to see infection and death rates decline thanks to the vaccinations? And perhaps we can ask Minister, and maybe Professor Lusana can weigh in on that one as well. And perhaps even Professor Shub, if you would like to weigh in on that fairly high-level question. One has just come through from Devlin Mapue. What are some of the challenges expected with the first batch, and is there a strategy to deal with any of these challenges? Dr. Pillay, perhaps if you can come in on that one. I see she has deleted her follow-up question, and I have requested Stephen Brumolo just to put on record that his question is very long. We will provide a written answer for that question. Thank you. I'll stop there. Minister, shall we begin with you?
Well, the one question is when do we see the vaccine taking effect? It's obviously a very difficult question to answer accurately too, because it depends on the rate of vaccination. It also depends on what wave we are at a particular time. And so all we can say is that we're looking to a point where we would have the majority of the people as targeted being vaccinated, and also that we have got evidence that we have actually beaten the surge at that time of the virus, so that the virus is not a huge threat, and preferably should have actually been completely removed, or it should have been completely defeated. But it's not going to be something that can put a definite timeline and say that's the time it's going to be. So we're going to have to play it by how the virus, the pandemic plays out. We hope to vaccinate as many people as possible. We also hope that during that time we'll use the containment measures, the use of masks, the sanitizers, washing of hands, and so on, until we can see that the whole country is out of the danger. Then we would know that by that time we will of the virus. So it's something that we will actually go by observation of how the situation is panning out publicly. Then the other question that was raised, I think we dealt with the question of I think the issues of pricing will leave to Dr. Anban Pillay to deal with. Largely from where we sit, we believe that we have to do everything we can to acquire as many vaccines as possible and vaccinate as many people as possible so that we are able to get much closer to the 40 million target. Obviously, as they say in English, the taste of the pudding is in pudding is in the eating. So it's going to depend on a whole lot of factors by the end of a number of countries that had huge amounts of vaccines ordered and not being able to get as many of their supplies as they expected. So from our perspective, our target is to get as close as possible to the 40 million. We may not be able to achieve it, but we really must have done as many as possible by the time. So the target has to be set and left at 40 million. We need to drive the whole program to be able to get as close as possible to that number. If it does not work out, it will just be because then we can explain what would have been the problem, but it's not because we would not have set a target that really must drive this campaign as much as possible. Our real concern with this whole program is that somewhere along the line, we've had a second wave. We don't know whether we'll get a third wave. Now, it's going to be very difficult to say we've got the vaccines, but we're taking our time. We need to really make sure that if we've got the vaccine, let's drive as much as possible the campaign so that more people must be on the safer side of getting infected than we would be risking that if there's another resurgence, they would be affected. So it remains a realistic target. It's a target which really is a tall order. We're going to have to push, but obviously, hopefully we'll get enough vaccines in the process. But if there are delays there, it will then affect the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Let's move on to Dr. Anban Pillay.
Thank you, Dr. Manzi. The first question I'll deal with is the one relating to healthcare workers. I think it's important to appreciate that in order for the program to start with the first set of doses, we need to start somewhere. And it's important that we start consistently across the country in the same place. And so we all agreed after much discussion that we would start workers, then move to primary care and then into the community. And that's the order we'd be moving in to make sure that we have a consistent approach to vaccination. And in that approach, I would think that plastic surgeons work in hospitals and they would be entitled to vaccination there. So would many of the other surgical disciplines that would normally be working in a hospital environment. So they would be vaccinated in that environment. The question around the price we paid, no, we didn't pay a premium for the 1.5 million doses. It is the standard price that Serum Institute charges countries, particularly those that are in the upper middle income group. A friend of mine who works in the Ministry of Health in Brazil saw the article about what South Africa had paid and some of the perceptions, and just sent me a message saying, this is I think a week ago, and they paid exactly the same price from the Serum Institute. So this is not a different price that we paid. I also have been engaging with other companies that are producing the Astrazeneca vaccine, and they've been quoting us exactly the same price that the Serum Institute charged us. So I don't think it was a premium. I do know even in the private market in India, the Serum Institute is charging close to $8 or $9 for the vaccine within that market. So there are differences in prices. They've taken a tiered pricing approach in terms of that, and I think that's the reason why we paid a particular price for the vaccine. What challenges do we see with the first batch? I think we're embarking on a vaccination program of adults. No country in the world has had a vaccination program where they try to identify adults or all adults and try to vaccinate them. I think that's probably our biggest challenge in identifying the people and making sure that they come through. There are some logistical challenges as well. The particular one is we have a limited supply of vaccines, and we need to treat every dose preciously. That requires that people are identified early who will be vaccinated. So when we dilute a particular vial, whether it has 5 or 10 doses in it, we should make sure that we use every dose in there for a patient rather than diluting it. And at the end of the day, we don't have patients and discarding those doses, which would then go to waste. And so I think that those are some of the challenges we learn from. And I'm hoping that that process is quick and we're able to get onto a more efficient mechanism after the first phase. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pillay. Dr. Tulari?
I think the question that I wanted to respond to, Dr. Pillay has already responded to. All health workers are going to be prioritized. We may find that we look at risk categories, starting with those that are exposed to aerosol generating procedures such as intubation, ventilation. But so it's not going to be a matter of saying whether you're a nurse or you're a surgeon, but if ever you're exposed to an environment that will be of a higher risk, then you may fall into the first category. But all health workers are going to be prioritized in phase 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tulari. Let me check if Professor Mlisana would like to weigh in, or has Minister covered you, Prof?
No, I think the Minister has covered it well. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. And Professor Barry Shu?
Yeah, maybe I could just add, you know, when will we start seeing an effect of the vaccine? I think it's really going to depend on the particular population. Once that population reaches herd immunity, I think we've seen it in the rollout programs overseas, for example, in Israel, United Kingdom, where, like, for example, the elderly, once a certain level has been reached in that population, then one does start to seeing declines in various parameters in hospital admissions and ventilator usage and mortality and so on. So I think as each phase, as one reaches that herd immunity, I think one will then start seeing the effects. But obviously for the whole population, it's going to depend on when one reaches the stage of herd immunity to see how the effect is going to be on the whole population. Until that time, and we've seen also in the rollouts overseas, we won't really see. We still will have the waves coming up, and we still will have significant infection. And that, as the Minister said, we still will have to keep up with the non-pharmaceutical interventions. Thank you.
And on that, Professor Shub. Now I'm going to move on to the Q&A section on the actual webinar itself. 10 questions, and we will answer question from the chat. And then we really must give an opportunity to the Deputy Minister and the Minister to just very quickly and succinctly summarize in vernacular for our people who need to also be communicated to. Now, there will be, of these 11 questions, I think we'll only have about 5 or 6 because the others have been covered. And so I will start with Carolyn. That's load shedding. What procedures will be in place to ensure that we preserve the integrity of the cold chain storage? We'll then move to Sibusiso Mabele. I'm sorry. I think that maybe that first question can be taken by Dr. Anban Pillay. Then we have a question from Sibusiso Mabele, Minister. What is the plan to eliminate the doubts from the community about vaccination? We then have a question from Mohammed Kola. If the efficacy is about 70%, is it not correct that you may have to vaccinate more than 40 million to attain herd immunity? Professor Shub, I think perhaps if you can weigh in on that one, and maybe Prof. Mlisana as well, if she would like to. And then we have a question asking whether the students, and this is a frequently asked question, whether students will be considered for phase 1 or which phase will they be considered for? from Damien Mehu. In addition, questions on funding, what is the level of the cross-subsidy utilizing the SCP mechanism that the insured will pay, and will that level apply to the corporates who assist their employees? I'm pretty sure, Dr. Tulari, that you articulated this quite well, but perhaps maybe we can just answer the question there. And then, Minister, what are the plans to manage corruption in the process of vaccine distribution? From Ronald Kellerman again, will the management of number of dosages given and number of vials used also be monitored as part of the electronic system, or will it still be managed on a paper-based system as with the other vaccine campaigns? Perhaps Milan. Do we know that it will work against the variants? They call them mutation, but I'll take the liberty of correcting them and call them a variant. And then the last question is, how long is the vaccination going to last in the human system to protect them? Again, perhaps Professor Shub can ask that one. And that's the end of the Q&A section. And to pick up on a frequently asked question, the people still want to know, if you have had COVID, how long must you wait before you can get your vaccination? Thank you very much. We will end with this Q&A session before we move on to the Deputy Minister. Thank you. We will begin again with the Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much. Let me deal with just two questions. The issue of corruption, we have a number of work streams in the Interministerial Committee, and we've asked each one of them to look into the risks so that we can identify the risk and deal with the issues early and prevent corruption. We have also worked with the Treasury to reduce the level of the procurement chain process, to make sure that we don't have too many people involved in the purchasing of the vaccines. We also are going to be looking fairly closely at the area of logistics, distribution, and storage, so that there's no corruption there. We've already had a meeting with the Auditor General and tabled to the office all the approaches that we're taking to make sure that at the end of it, they can give us a sense of checks and balances that they might want to suggest as we deal with the risks associated with this process. We want to make sure that there's no corruption. In this case, we must actually, at the end of this program, we must all remember how well the vaccination program was executed, but not so much to be distracted by how much corruption happened at that time. We also have a team, they call it Fusion. It's a team that is supposed to combine all the investigative arms of the criminal, excuse me, criminal justice system, and they will also be brought very closely so that for any process that's going on, we can report early any sign of abnormality. So we don't have to go very far before investigations are started and action is taken. So that is the way we're looking at it, but all of us are quite clear that the issue of corruption should not define the process of this new vaccination program. Then the other issue around the elimination of doubt in the community about the vaccine, we are going to be going out on a massive program of information sharing, communication. We also are going to be working together with various leaders in society, be they the faith-based organizations or leaders in civil society and different levels of government, provincial, districts, and so on, to ensure that there is adequate information that's made available to the communities so that they can ask the questions and remove the doubt about the vaccines, but also just to share information to make people understand how important it is to all participate in this vaccination program. We have been encouraged to see the research that's been released recently, indicating a large number of people are very keen on the vaccines, and that the numbers of people who will really not take the vaccine is actually quite small. And so we will work with all the leaders and stakeholders to make sure that we can assure communities about the safety and the importance of the vaccines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Anban Pillay?
Thank you. I think I had two questions. The one relating to load shedding. Certainly, there will be a risk of electricity disruption in facilities where there's no generators, and that will be a risk for us. So in the distribution of the vaccine, we'll certainly note that and make sure that we don't store vaccines in those areas where there are no generators or there's risks related to the supply of electricity. We will be using a hub and spoke model for the supply and distribution. So to keep most of the stock in one central point where there is good electricity supply and good security, and from there move out into a district, into various points where the vaccination program would happen. On the question relating to students in phase 1, this issue was raised by the Department of Higher Education. The Ministerial Advisory Committee is looking at this, and I think we will probably have a clear understanding of which part of the first phase they would fit into in terms of their vaccination program. I think those were the two questions for me, Dr. Manzi.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pillay. Dr. Tulare?
On the issue of the level of cross-subsidization and how it is going to be determined, there are various approaches that we have taken. The first one is through a mechanism of a single exit price, where we'll ensure that through the single exit price, we achieve a 1-on-1 or 2-on-1, depending on a ratio that will be determined of how those that can cross-subsidize will do so for those that are not insured. But it's a mechanism that has been discussed with medical schemes and the boards of trustees of schemes, and it's a principle that is understood, and that if we do not do that, what may eventually happen is that we may not achieve our level of herd immunity that we're envisaging. So in terms of the exact figures, I would say that that will depend on the various permutations of vaccines that we are going to be receiving. And it's only when we have got exact types of vaccines that we can give an exact figure of what it is. But single exit price, it's a mechanism that is well defined, and it's in law. It's according to the Medicines and Related Substance Act, Section 22G, that allows for a mechanism of a single exit price. And we do this all the time, even for our other vaccines, where you may find that the price differential is such that the pricing in those that are acquiring medicines or vaccines through an SEP, there's a variability between what the public sector acquires the vaccine for in the private sector. So it's a principle that is well understood and it's commonly implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tulare. Melanie Wolmarans, there was one question for you.
Yes, thank you. So the system has been designed to link up with a stock management system. So as vaccines are being administered, it will be recorded, and then there's a link with the stock management system at the facility, as well as the stock distribution from the distribution side. So it's an integrated system. What I presented was the part that mainly focuses on the vaccine administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Shu?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Dr. Manzi. Yeah, the issue about the different efficacies of the vaccines, one, I often get asked that, but I think you must remember that these efficiency calculations are really based on the trial data. In other words, when these vaccines underwent clinical trials, and the numbers were really dependent on the numbers of individuals who got ill, and then comparing those who are in the vaccine arm versus those who are on the placebo arm and doing those calculations. Now, obviously, when the vaccines go out into millions of people, that might be a little bit of a different story. That's the one point. The other point is that it depends on the endpoints that one is looking at. So if one is looking at the endpoint that protects against minor illness, for example, you're going to get a lower efficacy than if it protects against more severe illness. So I think one can't put too much store on the differences between these vaccines. I think that we've done our calculations with the numbers, and the numbers do depend on what's called the R value, which determines how infectious the virus is. And we've determined that if we do get the value that 67% or 68%, we should reach herd immunity. Without going into too much detail of those numbers, but that's how we have calculated it. And if we do have a good vaccine, which both the Astrazeneca vaccine is, the Pfizer vaccine is, has been shown by the clinical trials, and we do get a high enough coverage, we should get to herd immunity. With regard to how long-lasting the immunity is after vaccination, of course, we don't know that. It's just too early. The vaccines haven't been around for long enough. What we do know when we look at the immune response after infection, there is some good news, because there have been the more recent studies which are reported in the literature have shown that there's good immune response up to 6 months and even past 6 months, both of the antibody response as well as the cell-mediated response. So these are both arms of the immune response. And also memory cells seem to also be long-lasting at least past 6 months. Now, longer than that, of course, we don't know, because the infection hasn't been around for long. But probably the vaccine should give at least as durable and at least as effective protection as the infection. So I think we're pretty optimistic that we should get reasonably long-lasting immunity. Probably not the same kind of durability as we get, for example, with measles vaccine, which is a different story, but at least for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. I think we have to kind of wait and see. But there certainly should be a reasonably durable immunity to be able to bring the infection down. If we have to repeat with recurrent vaccination, like we do, probably not as frequent as influenza, which is a very changeable virus, but maybe in intervals of a few years, that remains to be seen. Then the other question about how, if someone is infected or has been recently infected, should they be vaccinated? I think our advice is that if somebody's been recently shown to be infected or recovered, they should defer vaccination probably for about 3 months after they recover. In other words, to give a 3-month period. There isn't any harm in it. I should mention that if someone does get vaccinated reasonably soon after they've recovered, there wouldn't be harm, but there wouldn't be any point in it, because they would have immunity from the infection itself. So it probably would be better in terms of getting a longer lasting, more durable immunity, to wait at least about 3 months after they've recovered from the infection before receiving the vaccine. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Shoup. Prof. Lesana?
Thank you very much. I think actually Professor Shoup has tackled a lot of the questions. There's just one that I thought I could also address, where people were asking, will the vaccines be mixed, in that if you get the first dose, are you likely to get a different vaccine for the second dose? And the answer is that no. If you've got, you'll get the 2 doses of the same vaccine. So vaccines cannot be mixed, because remember, the trials have been done on the one particular vaccine. So we will not be mixing the vaccines. But otherwise, I think most of the other questions have really been answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing that particular question, Professor. And now we are now drawing to a close, and I'm going to invite the Honorable Deputy Minister, Dr. Joe Phaahla. just to address our compatriots in vernacular and give some closing remarks. Honorable Deputy Minister.
Well, thank you very much.
Maybe I will need to check if the Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you
Minister.
very much. Thank you. I know it's late at night, so I will not hold you for long. Just a few for our Sotho speakers, those who might still be listening, just to re ba tsebisa gore re fitlhile sebakeng seo lenaneo la rona la moento wa go thibela bolwetse bja corona le gore šireletša mo bolwetseng bo fitlhile seemong se e leng gore re setse re lokile gore re tsamaise lenaneo le. Re rata go ba kgothatsa gore ditlhare tse di gaufi le go fitlha tsa go tlo thibela bolwetse bja corona, moento wa go tlo tlhaba ditshwana tsa go thibela bolwetse bja corona. Matšatši a mane go fitlha go a matlhano a tlang, ditlhare tse di tla be fitlhile mo Afrika Borwa mo. Ke rata go tšea nako e go kgothatsa setšhaba sa Afrika Borwa gore ditlhare tse re di tlisang mo re tlo di tlhaba setšhaba ka tsona tsa go thibela bolwetse bja corona. Ke ditlhare tse di šireletšegileng. Re kgopela batho gore ba seke ba theeletša batho ba e leng gore ba tsamaya ba bolela dipoelelo tše e leng gore ga di na nnete tša gore ditlhare tše tša go thibela bolwetse bja corona di na le mathata, di ka ba tlišetša malwetse. Ba bangwe ba bolela gape le gore ditlhare tse di tlo ba tsentša malwetse a fapaneng. Re rata go ba kgothatsa gore mmušo wa lona o na le tsebo, re kry-ile batsebi ba ditlhare tse tsa moento lefatshe ka moka gore ba tiišetše gore ditlhare tse di bolokegile. Gape re na le lekgotla la SAPRA, South African Health Product Regulatory Authority ya gona mo South Africa mo, e leng gore le bosigo bja ka tseno ba boletse mo gore ditlhare tse ba di checkile ebile ba hweditše le gore di šireletšegile. So re matšatšing a tlang mo gare ga kgwedi ya February, bašomedi ba tsa maphelo, baoki, dingaka le ba bangwe bašomedi ba tsa maphelo ba tla ba tsamaya lefatshe la South Africa ka ofela ba tsamaisa ditlhare tse tsa go enta. Re tlo thoma ka bašomi ba tsa maphelo ko dipetleleng le ditleliniking, re latele ka bašomi ba ba šomelang setšhaba, re fetse ka setšhaba ka ofela. Gomme re ka ofela a re ingwadišeng gore re tlo hwetša moento o tla re thusang go thibela bolwetse bja corona. Ke a leboga. Thank you very much, Lwazi.
Thank you, Dawe. And just to reassure you, Deputy Minister, that these sessions are extremely critical. The broadcasters, if they're not still taking it live now, they will certainly be taking this recording, and these do end up in mainstream and community radio stations. So really, we very much appreciate you giving us these remarks even at this late hour. I would now like to hand over to the Minister. And Minister, may I also request that, in fact, once Minister is done, if Minister can close the session. Thank you very much, Minister.
Siyabonga kakhulu Dr. Manzi, sifisa ukudlulisa emphakathini wonke ukuthi lesimemezelo sanamhlanje bese kuchaza ukuthi imigomo ebesiyilindele isizofika, ilindele ukuthi ifike uma kuqala inyanga ngomhla ka-1, okuzokwenza ukuthi kulezo nsuku sihlaleke sihlolisise ukuthi konke kufanele kuhamba ngendlela kufanelekile. Uma sekuphelele leso sikhathi kizobe siyakwazi ukudlulisela ukuthi siqale ukugoma abantu ngayo. Kodwa uhlelo sulubekile lokuthi ukugoma kwe-COVID-19 kufanele kuqalwe ngalabo abasebenza ezikhungweni zezempilo, ngoba izifo ze-COVID-19 zifikela kubo. Kubalulekile ukuthi sibe nabantu abangamasosha abaphephile uma kuyiwa ezibhedlela, sithole ukuthi abazugula baguliswa izifo esofika nazo. Ngaleyo ndlela ke sifuna ukuqala ngabo bonke, odokotela, abahlengikazi, abashanelayo, abasebenza kuzo zonke inhlaka nje lapho bekwazi ukuhlangana khona nabantu abagulayo. Kubaluleke kakhulu ke lokho ngoba sizoqhubeka nabanye esizobanikeza ukuthi nabo bagonywe, kakhulukazi njengabantu abanjengothisha, amaphoyisa nabo bonke abasebenza phambi komphakathi lapho bengathi uma besebenza batheleleke ngezifo, abasebenza emahhotela, abasebenza endaweni ezinabantu abanesiminyaminya. Konke lokho kuzolandela kamuva, kusho ukuthi ngalezi iy'nhlelo esenze ngazo kuzoqala abezempilo bese kuza labo basebenzela umphakathi. Ekugcineni-ke sobe sekungenelwa kubo bonke abantu baseNingizimu Afrika abangenazo izifo, kodwa laba abanezifo kuzodinga ukuthi siqale ngabo ngalesikhathi sibhekene nazo zonke iy'nhlaka zabantu abasebenza lapho kunengozi yokuthi bangatheleleka yilesifo. Iy'nhlelo-ke zonke zokuthi umgomo lo ubhaliswe ngokusemthethweni sesiwenzile, ngakho-ke amaphepha sekufanele ukuthi ukwazi ukufika. So uthenge enkampanini ese-India okuthiwa i-Serum Institute. Kodwa sisaqhubeka sathenga ezinye inhlobo zemigomo ngoba akekho onemigomo eyanele ukuthi singakwazi ukuthi sithenge kuye kuphela. Ngakho-ke sithenge endaweni ezihlukene, silindele ukuthi abantu babe ngangezigidi ezama-40 okufanele sigcine sesibanikeze wonke lo mjovo wokugoma. Kodwa-ke ngobuningi babantu kusho ukuthi kuzobe kwenzeka kusukela ngoFebruwari kuze kuyophela unyaka, esithemba ukuthi abaningi bobe sebekwazi ukuthi ngaleso sikhathi bakwazi ukuthola ukugonywa. Kodwa kubalulekile noma kuthiwa uhlelo lokugoma liyaqhubeka, abantu bangayeki ukusebenzisa izifonyo, ama-mask, banokusebenzisa izandla zihlale zigeziwe, nokuthi abantu bakwazi ukuthi uma bemile bagqagqane, bangabi nesimo sokuthi endaweni enesiminyaminya, ngoba soze sikwazi ukubona kahle ukuthi sekunqobele leli gciwane uma ngabe abantu abaningi sebetholile ukuthi bagonywe. So sathola futhi ukuthi negciwane selehlile inani lalo, kwenzela ukuthi ekugcineni bonke abantu bakwazi ukuphepha, ngoba noma singezukungena isifo ngoba mhlawumbe ugonyiwe usengakwazi ukusidlulisela komunye umuntu uma mhlawumbe uthintane nendawo enokungcwala okuphethwe okunegciwane le-COVID-19. Kakhulukazi-ke kwanamhlanje besizokwazisa nje lolo hlangothi ukuthi siyafisa sibambisane nawo wonke umphakathi, siyafisa futhi ukuthi kucaciswe zonke izinto ezethusa umphakathi njengokuthi uhlelo lokugoma lungase libe ingozi empilweni zabo. Siyazi ukuthi yonke imithi iba ney'ntwana, mhlawumbe yenza ukuthi uma ijovile kube khona indawo elumayo noma kube khona indawo ethanda ukumhlupha-hlupha, okungeyona kangako into eyinkinga kakhulu. So zonke izinto kufanele sicacise ukuthi into ezithusa abantu ngalokugonywa njengokuthi sihamba ngo-5G konke lokho, ukuthi akunjalo. Okubalulekile asibambisaneni sesiqiniseko sokuthi iyona ndlela kuphela ukuthi abantu bangasinda enkingeni yaleli gciwane uma kuwukuthi sonke sokwenza isiqiniseko ukuthi abantu bayagonywa. Ngaleyo ndlela-ke siyafisa usibambisane nawo wonke umphakathi, sidlulele kuwo wonke abaholi bomphakathi, abamabandla, abaholi bendabuko, abaholi bey'nhlangano zomphakathi, abasebenzi, nawo wonke umuntu ukuthi sibambisane, sidlulise umyalezo ukuthi abantu bakwazi ukuphepha kuleli gciwane. Siyabonga kakhulu. Thank you very much to all the panelists and to all the members of the media who have been with us and to members of the public. Thank you very much for this session. We will find another opportunity to share some more information as soon as we feel there's additional information that is worth sharing at that point. But thank you very much. We do know that it's taken much longer than initially anticipated, but we are really very grateful. We'll continue to share information. Where the information is inadequate for the journalists and the media, please send the questions. We'll try and answer as much as possible, even after this session is over. Thank you very much to all. Good evening, good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Good evening.
Good evening, Doctor.
Bye-bye, Minister, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.